Right, we have a cracking panel for you. Now, I've sat opposite Sachin Duggal, who's the chief wizard and co-founder of Builder.ai. Do we say the dot or just say Builder.ai?
It's good to say the dot because everyone knows where to go.
All right, excellent. And I've sat you there because you're going to help me interrogate the other guests. It's going to be like a sort of twofer, right? In between us, we're delighted to have Mohamed Al-Shan, Managing Director of the World Government Summit. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also, we have Nitin, Rakesh, CEO and MD of Mphasis. First of all, I'd like you to just briefly give me your kind of elevator pitch about what you do at Mphasis.
Think of us as enablers of applying tech to any form of business or governance. We work with primarily large enterprises worldwide. US is obviously our biggest market, in helping them really refresh their tech stacks and stay current with almost every part of the technology stack.
And you worked with India 10 years ago in helping to build the original...
We did. We still work with India. We still work with India.
But with the government of India, I mean.
Also, yes.
Okay. And before we come to you, Mohamed, tell us about Builder.ai.
So we've built a platform that uses Lego-like reusable features, AI, to build any kind of software application. And effectively, our assembly system allows us to take something where a consulting practice might have used 20 developers, and we can do it in 1.5. And really what we're trying to do is remove the entire complexity around people having to build software applications, whether they're small businesses or they're large enterprises, and really allowing people to unlock their potential. And
tell us, Mohamed, what the World Government Summit does.
So the World Government Summit is a platform that brings all the stakeholders within the ecosystem together. So we invite governments, private sector, thought leaders, academia, and international organizations to come into that platform and discuss how can we solve the challenges that are being faced by humanity.
Okay, so let's talk first of all about how emerging technologies like AI, like blockchain, automation, data analytics can revolutionize government operations and service delivery. Sachin, set out for us a challenge.
Yeah, I think the challenge, and sort of would love everyone's thoughts, is we think about technology today as automating a preordained human process. Why are we not thinking about new processes that can use technology irrespective of the human process? And like a really good example is using facial recognition for immigration.
So let's take that, because when you enter the UAE, it's so fast. And what's really interesting is that was actually a problem identified, and then government and business worked together. So Mohamed, tell us tell us that story.
Okay, so before jumping into that story, let's look at how governments operate versus the private sector. It's an undeniable reality that the private sector is moving at a very faster pace compared to governments. What the UAE government did a couple of years ago, and that's the challenge or the example that we're setting here, they realized that there is some sort of slowness within airport operations. The government did not try to solve that issue by itself. They invited the private sector into an accelerator program to help solving that challenge that's being faced by one certain operation within the government operations. I personally believe without engaging the private sector at a very early stage, this issue could never have been solved the way it is solved or operating today.
We could almost spend the entire time talking about how Gulf, the Middle East countries are using technology, because it's incredible. I know that in Saudi Arabia, you can sell your car in 10 minutes. So Sachin's going to sell me his Tesla. What do you drive?
I walk a lot.
You walked here. But you could sell that to me in 10 minutes, and all of the documents would be transferred at the same time. Whereas here in the UK, the DVLA, you send these things away in the mail, they might get it to you in a few weeks or months. I'd love to know from you, Nitin, what countries do you think are doing this well? Where do you see when you're working around the world, who's doing this well?
Yeah, I think you can see in pockets, and I go back to what Sachin said, for the last 50 years, we've been automating an existing business process. But over the last 10 years, just with the digital revolution, we've seen examples of some massive uplift. And I'll give you two examples. Something that India started 10 years ago, with the unique ID. That became the foundation for, in a way, reimagining governance and inclusion. And I think that was very smartly used over the last 5 years to expand massively into underbanked sectors. I think they opened 500 new bank accounts in India in the last 5 years. I mean, that's a mind-boggling number. And then they built a whole new payments infrastructure using that same foundation of UID with the UPI. And leapfrogged, I think you mentioned that in the conversation with the minister earlier. I think the leapfrog really happened when today 70% of adult Indians are using some form of a digital wallet. And then, of course, you start digitizing everything that we were doing manually before. And I think that's when you start transforming this front-to-back mindset of, how do you really transform the way you did something versus just automated the way you did something. I think I gave you another example of how when you open an account, whether it's for securities, investment, banks, it's a very lengthy process to go through KYC because, of course, you want to
know your
have
customer,
the right governance. We've digitized that process in India over the last 3 years, and I think COVID was a big boom for that because just couldn't get anything else done in physical format. So I think that has just again unleashed a whole new financialization of the assets in India, and hence I think those are 3 or 4 good examples of how this has been used. And of course, a lot has to change. I think we haven't seen a very good example of adoption of digital tech or AI or generative AI now for citizen engagement. I mean, it's still really cumbersome to deal with governments, and I think there's a huge opportunity, for that on that front. There's also a big opportunity that governments can, have a role that they have to play on reskilling side, which is I think another area where we've partnered with a few governments around the world in creating this whole digital skill initiative as well.
We also see it in India in healthcare now, Sachin. So I'd love to hear from you about some of the challenges that you see that you think we could see AI come in and revolutionize.
Look, I think a part of the challenge is behavioral, right? This idea that you have processes we automated, now we're bringing technology in. What we've not seen many governments, there's some exceptions, Dubai is an exception, I think. We've seen this in Saudi, we've seen this in Estonia, is a young company scale-up mindset. And so what do I mean by that? In Estonia, you can apply for citizenship online. The entire process is electronic. It's effectively running on some form of Web3. And what you see there is government creating infrastructure, private young companies, that are forefront of the technology, building the front end. And so, what I love about what we've done in India with medical records is we've created the block storage for medical records. But now we're taking the view saying we're not going to solve all the applications. And we're not going to go, with all due respect to all the big companies, and say, go build the applications for us. We're going to go to everyone that can build for it. And that mindset is really changing. I give you an example. During COVID, we got approached by the government of Karnataka to build a patient-doctor app because we've done it for another customer. And they're like, oh, we need this, but we need this so that we can speak to patients who have COVID. And we turned it around in 60 days and pushed it out, but there was infrastructure for us to leverage. And so I think you compare that to, say, the UK, and you have medical records that sit in the NHS, and then you go to Harley Street because you really need an urgent treatment for something. They can't access the medical records. And so you've got, I think the reason I go back to it is behavioral is you have an element of red tape. You have an element of, you never get in trouble for buying IBM approach. And both of those things are actually counterintuitive to building technology that will really leapfrog.
I love that example of health records. I had to have a CT scan. 10 days later, it still hadn't been transferred between this place where the scan was done in the hospital, and this was within the private system because I can't even go into it. But you mentioned a partnership that you had with the government of Karnataka. I know, Mohamed, that what you see is these best practices, these examples now being transferred government to government. Tell us a little bit about that.
So when it comes to best practices from governments, it's very important that we create that platform that allows governments to benefit from other governments or cities to benefit from other cities. There is no way that a city can reinvent the wheel, otherwise the train will leave and it will take them ages to keep up with that development. One of the initiatives that were launched back in the UAE at the World Government Summit platform, and it's not something for the UAE, it's something for governments around the world, is the Experience Exchange Program. And it's not only for government operations, but engaging the private sector, the international organizations within the context of that discussion. The main purpose of that program is to accelerate how governments operate. Let's say there is a successful model within the government of the UAE and government services. Why can't the government of Egypt adopt the same system, enhance it a little bit to cater to the Egyptian population and benefit from it? The same applies with other governments, not necessarily the UAE to another government, but a government to a government or an international organization to a government. The program has showed success over the past. We have around 21 cities around the world part of that program, and it became like a pool for best practices that any government can tap in and benefit from that specific experience.
And you've seen some good partnerships come out of that.
A lot of partnerships. So during the last World Government Summit, many cities approached the World Government Summit to sign to be part of that program. And they are undergoing the programs that are part of it.
Well, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because you've got this giant game of Tetris where everyone's filling a different piece. Like you just look at the UK, you look at how, for example, Companies House works. It's an incredible experience. It's like, it's so efficient, you get everything you want. Then you go deal with some parts of the NHS, and it feels like it was built by someone else. It's the same government. And so, you know, whether you run Tetris nationally, you run it internationally, there's so much to leverage. Some people have got process right. You know, we talked about pensions. Like the Swiss have nailed this. You get your last salary for 12 months, so you don't feel like the double impact of having lost a job. And some of it is just technology.
So we've got to finish off right now, but Nitin, just take us out with what good looks like and what are the challenges, one main challenge that stops technology being
I think the thing about technology is that it's like running on a treadmill. You stop running and you fall off it, right? So you have to keep reinventing, reinvesting, and you have to get used to the fact that change is a way of life. I think and partly cultural, partly infrastructural, but I think that's the one big lesson that almost anybody who wants to implement good technology has to learn.
So build in the idea that you have to change all the time.
Constantly.
Right, giving people like
I was going to say,
Sachin
Ian, I think that's a really good point, though, right? Because the cost to build the infrastructure, if you were building it today, is 1/100th of the cost of what you were building it 10 years ago. So we have to forget that we've got sunk costs. We have to build a number of things as if we were building them today.
Any final word from you, Mohamed? What challenge stops technology from being accepted?
I think the bridging the gap with the private sector. Governments need to listen to the private sector. Yes, it's good to regulate, but in a way that it does not limit innovation at its core.
Great. Thank you all very much, gentlemen, for joining us here in this session on embracing technology, transforming government and governance. We're going to